In 2015, Terry Rice was fired from Facebook, and that might actually be the best thing that ever happened for Terry's career. Within 18 months of being fired, Terry had built this entire new business that had a reliable six-figure income within 18 months of him being fired. Now, he did this by doing what everyone thinks creates a ton of value, but not necessarily a lot of income, and that is teaching. So in this video, what I want to do is actually go through Terry's strategies, how he's gone and built a six-figure business, and building that business from the ground up, from $0 all the way to at least 250K in revenue. So let's go through Terry's strategies, how he's gone from a teacher to a consultant and now a creator. So let's dive in. So here in 2015, right, Terry is fired from Facebook. And before he was at Facebook, he was at this little company called Adobe. So in terms of like maybe a career, and maybe if you're doing the big corporate jobs, right, like you got some really cool logos, except you just got fired from Facebook. So he gets fired from Facebook and he's like, all right, I want to start my own business and I think I can teach people how to do, or maybe consult, I can do services for Facebook ads. And let me give you a little bit of context, right? So 2015, in Facebook's ad revenue, right, they did $17 billion of ad revenue. And you're like, that's a really big business. You're right. But in 2023, it was $131 billion. A much different number. These are huge differences, right? So when Terry is starting his agency and helping people build these Facebook ads, people probably understand what Facebook ads are at this point, especially because it's $17 billion. However, it's not at its full scale, not by any means. See, things are still really scaling up, and it's a really good opportunity really to jump in and help people do that. So in terms of timing, this is really good to do that. But how do you actually get those first clients, especially after you've been fired and you might not even have the network? Well, Terry lives in New York City and he lives in Brooklyn. So what he did is he joined the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, right? So I'll just put BCC. And you would think, right, if I join this thing, I'm going to, meet all these different businesses, I'll have an opportunity to pitch them, all that kind of stuff, right? And he did that. So what he did is he got the list of 400 people, 400 businesses in the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, and he emailed 400 of them. But out of those 400 cold emails, only one became a paid client. So if you were relying on those 400 cold emails to turn into a real business all by themselves, it's just not going to work. And partly, right, is because you don't have a relationship with these people. They are cold. So if you're trying to build a business, what we want to do is get this actually number higher. So this is where Terry was pretty clever, and I think where things started really moving for him, is instead of going and just cold emailing people he had no relationship, no trust, no anything with, he kind of went back and he starts teaching. And he starts teaching at the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. But then he's at libraries and makerspaces and universities. All sorts of places, anywhere where he can teach, right? Anywhere he might find a client. So these are probably all free teachings, but here is where I think Terry was really clever in really scaling up maybe like a flywheel of how he got his clients. So what he ended up doing is later in about 2015, 2016 here, he joins a group called General Assembly, or GA, sometimes you'll hear it called. And if you don't know GA or General Assembly it's not a trade school, but it's like teaching, and it's a place where a lot of maybe like corporate, maybe professional development budgets are going potentially to learn like maybe new skills, whether that's digital marketing or I want to learn how to code, and just kind of maybe refine your skills as well. So Terry, right, he's doing these teachings, he's starting to maybe get some paid clients to do these kind of things, but like the chances you find maybe clients in these places is pretty low just because of like incomes, all that kind of stuff. Whatever it might be, right? But General Assembly kind of has his target population, right? If corporations, other businesses that are going to have the ad money and maybe the people to start putting into Facebook ads and meta ads at this point. The clever part that Terry did, though, is that he was teaching people, right? And he's getting paid by General Assembly. But also the people in his class are potential clients. And they are ones with bigger budgets than even General Assembly would have. So you would build these relationships, and typically, right, if you're building a relationship with people, you're not really selling at that point. You're just like, hey, like, is there an opportunity? And Terry did a really great job of kind of describing how he ended up getting into NBC. So here's Terry to kind of explain how he actually got a deal with NBC.
What I started doing is using those classes as a way to get corporate deals. So, for example, someone who attended one of my workshops happened to work at NBC. And I was like, hey, you came here for yourself. What if I helped your whole team do this stuff? And she said, okay, great, let's do it. And I was like, wow, that actually worked. So I landed this deal with NBC where I was doing workshops at their headquarters. And that was amazing. It was a great way to build my career and my resume and so forth.
Okay, so that itself, just by teaching at General Assembly and teaching, he's built a pretty consistent income by doing that. He got to a six-figure income within 18 months. However, in 2017, though, Terry had a really traumatic experience with him and his family as they were expecting a baby boy. And unfortunately, TJ, that was named after him, didn't make it through birth. So Terry and his family are traumatized. And if you're selling services, right, you have to be working in for those hours. But what Terry realized in this, this unfortunate event and this traumatic event was that he actually needed to find an opportunity to maybe sell products or services that didn't require his time, or at least not as much. That way, if he's not feeling it or whatnot, he still had an income coming in. So this is where you see Terry transitioning from teacher and digital agency to more of a creator. So here's what he did, and there's a lot of clever parts that really Terry did and shifting from a consultant or just service provider into a creator. So 2017, right? So we're back in 2017. He just lost his baby, which is hugely traumatic. And he's thinking, how do I not sell my time? So what he did is, right, like, hey, I'm doing Facebook ads. I've gotten really good. I'm doing consulting for them. And he's like, I'm going to do a Facebook ads course, right? He's like, I know how to do that. And you think, hey, if I run Facebook ads, just get this in the right people. Facebook ads are really growing, right? 2015, we already went through the numbers of how, 2015 to 2023, it's on an upward curve. You think this course should be easy to sell, especially because he's the guy from Facebook. This goes absolutely nowhere, like zero. It doesn't go anywhere. So just by posting, because you have the expertise doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna be able to sell something. And the course might have been amazing, but it wasn't. He didn't have maybe the right audience, or didn't even have an audience. And because at the time, what he's talked about is didn't have an email list. So maybe if you're selling a course or whatnot, like get an email list. If I can draw. Oh, look at that! Look at that envelope. So the Facebook ads course goes nowhere, and his creator journey is off to a little bit of a shaky start. And then here is where it gets interesting. In 2018, right? He's like, "What do I do with this creator journey? I can't get this Facebook ads course to go anywhere." And he has one big moment of serendipity. And that is he runs into Jason Pfeiffer of Entrepreneur Magazine, or Entrepreneur. And if you don't know Jason, Jason is the editor-in-chief at Entrepreneur. And it's one of the most serendipitous experiences because he met Jason and his wife actually at his daughter's like gym class. It was just a random moment of like, hey, I know you. And honestly, I can't do the story justice. So here's Terry to explain how he met Jason from Entrepreneur.
After my son died, I just really didn't want to go out in public too much whatsoever. I didn't want to see anybody. But my daughter, my oldest daughter, like she's still there. She's like, "Hey, Dad, we have to do stuff. Like what's the deal?" And I would often work on the weekend to distract myself from just what I was going through. And eventually, I said to myself, "You know what? I'm not working on weekends anymore." Because my daughter keeps on asking, like, "Dad, where are you going?" And she couldn't come with me. So I stopped working on weekends, and then like 2 weeks later, actually, that's when I met Jason at some free gym class here in Brooklyn. I knew who he was because I've been following him online for quite a long time. But he was like talking to his wife about his birthday. It was his birthday. They're trying to plan what they're going to do next. So I'm like, how do I interrupt this guy? How am I going to make this happen? But I want to highlight this because sometimes that window of opportunity is so small and closes so quickly, you have to take action. You just have to. And I always say that luck is when preparation and opportunity are met with action. So I'm like, I'm prepared. I know who this guy is. I have the opportunities right in front of me, right? I got to take action. So that's what I did. And I just kind of highlight things. I did some free work on behalf of Entrepreneur without them asking me to do so about ways they could optimize their website, so on and so forth. And that's how I got involved.
So he meets Jason, they get coffee, and what the interesting piece is that what Terry explained to me was that he did a favor for him. It was just a very simple one. Maybe like, hey, I'll meet with your digital ads team, or I'll meet with so and so. And then that kind of turned into the big opportunity to be a contributor, right? And he's just kind of growing these different roles, right? So I'm like, hey, I meet you, I'm building trust. Like, hey, I got a really good coffee, but let me do you solid. And then he's doing even more, right? So the more you're doing and building a relationship with people, the more they're going to trust you, and the more they're like, hey, I actually can work with so and so. And Terry consistently, as we're kind of winding through this his entire business model, him building relationships this way is a really big way of how he's built a 6-figure business. So he did a contributor, and now he's done a podcast, he's done books, he's done a little bit of everything with the entrepreneur. And the clever part in all of this, I think, is really crucial to note here is right. This Facebook course is B2C, but this entrepreneur piece is a B2B model, right? And B2B typically has way more bigger check sizes than a B2C. Now, these are harder to get because they take more time. Typically, you got to build relationships. But if you're building relationships, right, these are way easier to get. And he's building a really stable income because they're more B2B and they can pay a little bit more also than B2C. So now Terry is a contributor at Entrepreneur. He's got a real business going. He's teaching at General Assembly. He's got a 6-figure business. Things are going really smoothly, and things continue to get even better. In 2019, he's still working at General Assembly and teaching there, but he gets a really great opportunity that really, I think, exploded his business. And that is he got invited to be a speaker and be the representative for General Assembly at a little conference called South by Southwest. South by Southwest has looked a lot different than I think when it started, but it's still a massive conference for creatives and entrepreneurs. It is a really big kickoff, I think, to the year in a lot of ways, and a lot of amazing startups and a lot of amazing things have come out of South by Southwest. And Terry, as he mentioned it when I was talking with him, is that if you're a speaker at South by Southwest, you kind of become a celebrity. And because of that, right, you meet a ton of people, and the people in the audience at South by Southwest, it's not the cheapest ticket in the world, are people that can pay for things. So because of that, he was able to actually get more paid opportunities just by being at South by Southwest. The other thing is that this was one time at South by Southwest, but later on, I believe in 2023, Terry got invited again, and then he invited actually a videographer, and he actually paid them to actually record him speaking at South by Southwest. So that way he had a reel of content and all that kind of stuff that he can then use as like a speaker reel and actually help him get more speaking opportunities, because the speaking opportunities are even a bigger way of actually expanding the way he's doing his teaching in that flywheel. So on that note, let's actually go through and explain a little bit more in depth the 3 main traction channels I would say Terry Rice is using to build his business into a 6-figure income business. And the first one, right, is this flywheel we've been talking about. So this flywheel of teaching, I would say. And this flywheel of teaching, right, is let's say he's teaching, right? Teach. And then this turns into you're demonstrating, I would say, demonstrate expertise. Right? So you demonstrate expertise, and through that, you're building trust with someone, because if you're teaching someone, you're going to, build a relationship with them, and they're going to be like, hey, that person, like, legit, they know their stuff. And because of that, right, it's really easy to be like, hey, maybe I'm not the person to do that. Maybe they're sitting in the audience, whatever it might be. But they're like, well, you're the expert. So like, can I just like pay you to do that? And that's when he's gaining clients, right? Which is then revenue, right? Because you're getting paid for that. And you just keep it going, because the more revenue, right, that you're still going, and you just keep going. So there's this big flywheel of the more he teaches, the more revenue, and actually the more expertise he gets, because just like he did with South by Southwest, he has a video reel of here's my speaker reel, whatever it might be. He's continuing to build this expertise, then he can then charge even more money. So instead of maybe it started at like, a few $100s for his workshop, now it's like, hey, it's like $5,000, it's $20,000, whatever it might be. The more expertise he has, the more he can charge for what he's doing. There's a limit to that, right? Only certain businesses are going to be able to spend for X amount of money just for budgets and whatnot. But the more he does expertise and the more he teaches, the more expertise and the more he can charge. The second traction channel I would say Terry use is small favors. And the small favors, right? So I mentioned, right, he did this with Jason Pfeiffer at Entrepreneur, right? that, maybe met with them, got a coffee, like, hey, what have you thought about this? Have you done this? Right? Those are small favors, maybe small ideas. Like, hey, I can help with this little bit of piece of strategy. I'll do it for free, no big deal. Right? You're helping out a friend is the way it's kind of perceived. But Terry kind of talked about a few different things, a way of how to actually do small favors when I chatted with him. And one of the ways, which I think I'm seeing more and more people do this, is actually just by like engaging with people on social media, right? And you're like, how is that a small favor? How is that helpful for someone? Well, if you're engaging on someone's social media, right, it's not just like, hey, cold emailing them or just emailing them or texting them, whatever it might be, right? You're going to be more memorable if like, hey, that person's on my social media post like every day, and they actually provide like a thoughtful comment. So if you're doing that, right, you're gonna be like, hey, that they're making me think, or they're being helpful, like giving me feedback, right? So there's feedback you can give them. You could, be like, hey, that's a really cool, encouragement. You could, kind of spark the conversation maybe further, all that kind of stuff, right? So if you're doing these three things on social media, obviously those are relationship building things, but also, right, if they're posting on social media, that means they're probably trying to gain a following or, get this in front of more eyeballs. So, and if you're doing these three things, well, the post is probably going to go further along. So if you're doing, this is a small favor, just engaging, taking, 30 seconds to like, hey, this is great. Or have you thought about that? You can post on LinkedIn, Twitter, or X, whatever it is, and post on those things and just comment and be engaged. And I would consider that a small favor, just like if you're meeting with Jason Pfeiffer or anyone and being like, hey, I'll talk about this for a second or help you out with this little thing, not a big deal. These, in my mind, are the same thing. The third and last thing I want to talk about that Terry has really used to gain traction is what I would call paid content for other audiences. And the key part of this is the other audiences. Right. So we talked about here, right, like the General Assembly classes. And then we've talked about South by Southwest, right? And he's getting paid to do these things, right? So this is kind of like them paying for customer acquisition, which is pretty crazy. Because if you've watched maybe the video or read the post that I've talked about with Nathan Barry, he was doing this for free. He was writing on people's blog posts. He was getting in front of other audiences. And a lot of times there was like no money. For Terry, he's done this really creatively where he's actually getting paid to get in front of these other audiences. And one of the other clever ways is, right, he would do maybe these, speaker engagements, but also what he would do in that setup is actually like, hey, I'll do this keynote for you, but also like, what if I wrote an article and it'll be like $1,500, $2,000. And so that's a really clever way. So you're doing the keynote, right? And that's going to be, let's say it's 5K, whatever. That's probably a low number. But then it's like, hey, I'll do this article for like 1K, right? And so you're going to increase your lifetime value of a potential customer or increase the deal size, which is sweet. But maybe you're aiming for SEO or just, maybe want to get in front of the audience more. This is doing way more work than I think people realize, right? Because not everyone's going to see this keynote. Even if they're at the event, maybe they're like on their phone or like, they got to step on the hallway, they got to go to the bathroom, whatever it might be, right? But this article, right, after on the conference, maybe even a year later, maybe this thing takes off and they're still doing really well. And he got paid to post on someone else's article. So that's a really clever way of kind of increasing that deal, but also getting in front of other audiences to do this in a really big way. Now, there's one more thing in this paid content for other audiences that I want to point out. And that is more not this flywheel, but really this like tree of growth, I would say. So let me explain, right? So let's say he's at the speaking gig 1, right? Speaking gig. And here, right, he's going to get maybe a client, maybe, for his services, whether that's doing like Facebook ad services, digital marketing, copywriting, maybe he gets, there's more content for them. Sweet. But then he's going to probably get another speaking opportunity, or he's going to hope he's getting one, right, out of this. Right? So he's going to get another one. Well, then that just kind of spirals, right? Because then you got client number 2. And we do it all over again, right? And you're not always, right, going to get a client. You're not always going to get another speaker opportunity. But if you're recording them, right, this turns into different types of content. then you can kind of just keep it going and maybe fill it in for yourself, right? Because if you have it recorded, then people be like, oh, that was a really good point, or that was a really good piece. And you're just kind of expanding what you're already doing. So it's kind of like when people are like, hey, here's this long form video content, and then you're turning into like short form video, or you're turning it into a blog post, right? It's the same concept where he's taking the speaking gig, getting it recorded, and then he's also getting other opportunities. So essentially, Terry, what he's done is turned a speaking gig into this big web of potential opportunities. And is it going to work every time? No. But if you take enough speaking opportunities that are getting paid, so essentially it's paid acquisition, or he's getting paid to do acquisition, this is going to really spiral, and it's going to take a minute to get going. But as you can see with Terry's business, this has really taken off. And through these 3 channels of teaching, doing a small favor, and doing paid content for other audiences, Terry has built a really impressive business that is now a 6-figure business that's quite reliable. And he's pretty much an advisor in all these different businesses and helping a bunch of other people build a 6-figure bootstrapped business. If you thought this video was helpful, I would love it if you give it a like. And if you're looking for more content like this, check out the newsletter in the description below.